I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There she was, my daughter-in-law Emma, standing in the parking lot of Halifax General Hospital at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. She was still in her paramedic uniform, her hair pulled back in that practical ponytail she always wore on shift. And next to her was my grandson, 10-year-old Lucas, with his hockey bag and his school backpack at his feet. I pulled my truck up alongside them. Emma's face was pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes that told me she'd been crying. Lucas looked confused and a little scared. Emma? Lucas, what are you two doing here? Why aren't you at home? I asked, rolling down my window. Emma looked at me, and I saw her jaw tighten. She was trying to hold it together in front of Lucas. Dad, she said quietly, can we talk? Privately? I nodded and turned to Lucas. Hey buddy, why don't you hop in the truck? You can sit up front and pick whatever music you want on the radio. Lucas's eyes lit up a bit at that. He knew I usually insisted on my classic rock station. He grabbed his bags and climbed into the passenger seat, and I watched as Emma walked around to my driver's side window. What's going on? I asked, keeping my voice low. She pulled out an envelope from her jacket pocket. Her hands were shaking. Derek had me served this morning. At the station. In front of my whole crew. My blood ran cold. Derek was Emma's ex-husband, Lucas's father. They'd been divorced for 3 years now, and it hadn't been pretty. Derek had left Emma for someone else, some woman named Monica who worked in pharmaceutical sales and made good money. Real good money, from what I understood. Served with what? Custody papers. He's filing for full custody of Lucas. Her voice cracked on the last word. I felt anger rising in my chest. On what grounds? Emma's laugh was bitter. Monica apparently thinks that a paramedic who works 12-hour shifts can't provide adequate care for a child. She told Derek that Lucas deserves better than a mother who's gone for half the day dealing with emergencies. She said, and I quote from the papers, "A paramedic's erratic schedule and exposure to traumatic situations makes her unfit to raise a child in a stable, emotionally healthy environment." I gripped my steering wheel hard enough that my knuckles turned white. That's the biggest load of... Dad, not in front of Lucas, Emma interrupted, glancing at the truck where my grandson was fiddling with the radio dial. I took a deep breath. What does Derek want? He wants Lucas during the school year. Full time. Says that he and Monica can provide stability. They just bought that big house in Bedford. You know, the one with the pool and the 3-car garage. Monica doesn't work shifts. She's home by 5:30 every night. They can afford tutors, hockey camp, whatever Lucas needs. What Lucas needs is his mother, I said firmly. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I know that. You know that. But Derek's lawyer is apparently some hotshot from Toronto. Cost him $15,000, just as a retainer. I called around this morning. Best I can afford is maybe $2,000 for a lawyer who mostly handles traffic tickets. I looked at my daughter-in-law. She'd been part of our family for 12 years now, since she married Derek when she was just 23. Even after the divorce, she was still family to me. She worked her tail off, pulling 12-hour shifts, sometimes back-to-back when they were short-staffed. She'd worked through the worst of the pandemic, putting her own life at risk to help others. And now some woman who'd never met Lucas until a year ago thought she knew what was best for him? Emma, I said, I want you to listen to me. You're not fighting this alone. You understand? She wiped her eyes. Dad, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm telling. Now, I know someone. His name is Thomas Kowalski. Used to be a paramedic himself, actually, back in the day. Got injured on the job and went to law school. Now he specializes in family law, and he's got a particular soft spot for first responders. Let me make a call. Emma looked at me with something like hope in her eyes. Do you really think? I think that you're a damn good mother, Emma. I think Lucas loves you more than anything in this world. And I think it's time Derek and his new wife learned that money can't buy what really matters. She nodded slowly, then glanced back at Lucas in the truck. He knows something's wrong. He asked me why Daddy's lawyer came to our house. We'll explain it to him, age appropriately. But first, let's go to my place. You need to eat something and get some rest. When did you last sleep? I got off shift at 7 this morning. Haven't slept yet. That settles it. Come on. 30 minutes later, we were sitting at my kitchen table in Dartmouth. I'd made Emma some coffee, and Lucas was in the living room watching TV. I pulled out my phone and dialed Thomas Kowalski's number. Tom? It's Frank Morrison. Yeah, I'm good. Listen, I need your help. It's about my grandson. I explained the situation while Emma sat across from me, nursing her coffee. I could see the exhaustion in every line of her face. She'd been running on adrenaline since Derek's lawyer showed up, and now it was all catching up to her. When I hung up, I gave Emma a small smile. He'll see us tomorrow morning at 9. He says it sounds like Derek's case is built on prejudice, not facts, and that usually doesn't hold up well in court. Emma let out a long breath. I don't even know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. Your family. Now, go upstairs and sleep in the guest room. I'll watch Lucas. But I need to. Emma. Sleep. That's an order. She managed a weak smile and headed upstairs. I heard the guest room door close, and then I went into the living room, where Lucas was watching some cartoon about superheroes. Hey, buddy, I said, sitting down on the couch next to him. Can we talk for a minute? He muted the TV. Is Mom okay? Smart kid. Nothing got past him. Your mom's fine. She's just tired from work. But I need to explain something to you, and I need you to listen carefully, okay? He nodded, his brown eyes serious. Your dad wants you to live with him and Monica during the school year. Not just for visits, but all the time. Your mom would get you on weekends and holidays. Lucas's face scrunched up. But I don't want to live there all the time. Monica's nice and everything, but she's not Mom. And Dad's always working too. He's barely even home when I visit. I know, buddy. And that's something you might have to tell a judge. His eyes went wide. A judge? Like in court? Maybe. Your dad's lawyer is going to try to convince a judge that you'd be better off with your dad and Monica. But your mom's not going to let that happen without a fight. And neither am I. Lucas was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he said, Monica said something last month when I was there for the weekend. What did she say? She asked me if I worried about Mom when she was at work. If I thought about her getting hurt or seeing scary things. She said it must be hard having a mom who's never home at normal times. I felt my jaw clench. And what did you tell her? I said Mom comes to all my hockey games. She helps me with my homework. She makes my lunch every day before school. And she always tucks me in at night, even when she has to go to work at 7. She says she wants to see me one more time before her shift starts. My heart swelled with pride. That's exactly right, Lucas. Your mom loves you more than anything. I know, he said simply. That's why I want to stay with her. Over the next 2 weeks, Thomas Kowalski built our case. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s with gray hair and the kind of calm confidence that came from years of experience. He interviewed Emma extensively, documenting her schedule, her childcare arrangements, everything. It turned out Emma had it all figured out better than Derek ever knew. On days she worked the day shift, 7 to 7, Lucas went to before and after school care at his elementary school. On night shifts, Emma made sure she was home to get Lucas ready for school, take him there herself, and then she'd sleep while he was in class. She'd be up by 3 to pick him up, and they'd spend the afternoon together before her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, would come over at 6:30 to stay with Lucas until bedtime. Your system is solid, Thomas told Emma during one of our meetings at his office. You've got documentation, you've got witnesses, and most importantly, you've got a happy, healthy child who's thriving in school and activities. But Derek's lawyer is going to argue that Monica can provide more stability, Emma said. She's home every night. They have more money. They can afford things I can't. Thomas leaned back in his chair. Let me tell you something I learned in my years as a paramedic. The most important things in an emergency aren't the fancy equipment or the newest ambulance. It's the person who shows up, stays calm, and does the work. Same thing applies to parenting. It's not about who has the biggest house or the most money. It's about who shows up every single day, no matter what. The court date arrived faster than I would have liked. It was a cold morning in early November, the kind where you could see your breath in the air. Emma wore a simple navy blue dress, and her hair was down, professional but still herself. Lucas was staying with Mrs. Patterson during the hearing. Thomas had explained that while judges sometimes spoke with children privately in custody cases, they usually waited until after hearing from both parents first. Derek showed up with Monica and his lawyer, a sharp-looking man in an expensive suit named Richard Pemberton. Monica was dressed like she was going to a cocktail party, all designer labels and perfect makeup. Derek had put on weight since I'd last seen him, Probably from all those client dinners he was always talking about. He worked in insurance sales, commercial stuff, and from what I gathered, he was doing pretty well for himself. We all filed into the courtroom. Judge Patricia Chen presided, a woman in her mid-60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Thomas had told us she was fair but thorough. Derek's lawyer went first. He painted a picture of Monica and Derek's life that sounded like something out of a magazine. The 4-bedroom house with the finished basement, the stable work schedules, Monica's involvement in the community, her volunteer work with the hospital auxiliary, the private school they could afford to send Lucas to, the family vacations they could take. Then he got to his main argument. "Your Honor," Pemberton said, standing at his table, "while we respect Miss Morrison's dedication to her profession, we must consider the impact of her career choice on Lucas's well-being. She works 12-hour shifts that often extend longer due to the nature of emergency medicine. She's exposed to violent situations, traumatic injuries, and death on a regular basis. She comes home to her son carrying that psychological burden." I watched Emma's face. She kept it neutral, but I could see the slight tremor in her hands. "Furthermore," Pemberton continued, "her schedule is inherently unstable. She works days, nights, weekends. Lucas has been shuttled between school care programs and neighbors since he was 6 years old. He deserves to come home to a parent every single day at the same time. He deserves to have someone who can attend every school function, every hockey practice, every parent-teacher meeting, without having to request shift changes or arrange coverage." He went on for another 10 minutes, basically arguing that Emma's job made her a less adequate parent than Monica, who had the luxury of a 9-to-5 schedule and no real stress beyond meeting quarterly sales targets. When it was Thomas's turn, he stood up slowly. He didn't have the flashy suit or the polished demeanor of Pemberton. What he had was something better: authenticity. "Your Honor," he began, "I spent 20 years as a paramedic before an injury ended my career. So I understand Mr. Pemberton's characterization of the profession. Yes, it's demanding. Yes, the hours are irregular. Yes, paramedics see things that most people never have to witness." He paused, letting that sink in. But what Mr. Pemberton fails to acknowledge is that those same qualities that make someone a good paramedic make them an exceptional parent. Paramedics are trained to stay calm under pressure. They're trained to make quick decisions. They're trained to put others' needs before their own. They're trained to show up, no matter what, and do the job that needs to be done. Thomas walked over to where Emma was sitting and stood beside her. "Emma Morrison works 12-hour shifts, yes, but she's never missed a single one of Lucas's hockey games. She's attended every parent-teacher conference. She volunteers at his school's breakfast program on her days off. She's taught Lucas how to cook, how to do laundry, how to be responsible and independent, not because she's absent, but because she's present in ways that matter." He pulled out a folder from his briefcase. "I have statements here from Lucas's teachers, from his hockey coach, from the director of his before-school care program. Every single one describes Lucas as a happy, well-adjusted child who talks constantly about his mother. Mrs. Sarah Henderson, his 4th-grade teacher, notes that Lucas wrote about his mother for his personal hero assignment." "Would Your Honor like me to read what he wrote?" Judge Chen nodded. Thomas opened the folder and read, "My hero is my mom because she saves people's lives every day. She goes to work even when she's tired because people need help. She says that being a paramedic means you show up when someone is having the worst day of their life and you try to make it better. My mom makes my life better every day. She helps me with my homework and makes me laugh and always knows when something is bothering me. She works hard so we can have a nice apartment and so I can play hockey. When I grow up, I want to help people like my mom does." I saw Emma wipe her eyes quickly. Even Judge Chen's expression softened slightly. "Now," Thomas continued, "let's address the stability argument. Mr. Morrison and Miss Monica Bennett live in a beautiful house. They have resources. But resources don't equal stability. Stability comes from consistent love, reliable care, and emotional security. Lucas has lived with his mother in the same apartment building for 5 years. He attends the same school. He plays on the same hockey team. His life is stable." Thomas returned to his table and picked up another document. "I'd also like to address something that concerns me about this custody petition. Miss Bennett has known Lucas for approximately 14 months. In that time, according to Mr. Morrison's own visitation records. Lucas has spent roughly 48 overnight visits at their home. That's 48 nights out of over 400. Miss Bennett may have good intentions, but she doesn't know Lucas the way his mother does. She doesn't know that he's scared of thunderstorms and needs his mother to sit with him during storms. She doesn't know that he's lactose intolerant and needs special milk. She doesn't know that he struggles with reading and needs extra help with comprehension. Those are all things that can be learned, Pemberton interjected. But they haven't been learned yet, Thomas shot back. And that's the point, mister. Morrison wants to uproot his son from a loving, stable home with his mother and place him with a stepmother who's still essentially a stranger, all because that stepmother works a conventional schedule and has more money. That's not in Lucas's best interest. That's in the adult's interest. The hearing continued for another hour. Pemberton called Derek to the stand, and Derek talked about how much he loved Lucas and how he wanted to give him opportunities. But when Thomas cross-examined him, things got interesting. Mr. Morrison, how many of Lucas's hockey games did you attend last season? Derek shifted uncomfortably. I'm not sure exactly. Maybe 5 or 6? There were 22 games total. Miss Morrison attended 21. She missed one due to a mandatory training that couldn't be rescheduled. Can you explain to the court why, with your stable schedule and financial resources, you were only able to attend approximately 27% of your son's games? I had work commitments, Derek said defensively. Client meetings, that sort of thing. I see. And what's Lucas's current teacher's name? Derek blinked. Mrs. Henderson, I think. You think? It's Mrs. Henderson. Sarah Henderson. And what subject does Lucas struggle with most? He's mentioned having trouble with some subjects. Reading comprehension, Mr. Morrison. He's been working with a tutor for 6 months. Did you know that? Derek's face reddened. Monica handles most of the school stuff when he visits. Yes, Miss Bennett. How many of Lucas's hockey games has she attended? I don't know. Maybe 2 or 3? 2, actually. Both of which she left early. Mr. Morrison, you're asking this court to award you primary custody of your son. But you can't tell me his teacher's name with certainty. You don't know his academic struggles, and you've attended less than 1/3 of his extracurricular activities. Meanwhile, his mother, despite her unstable work schedule, has been present for 95% of his life. Can you explain that discrepancy? Derek couldn't. He stammered through a few non-answers before Judge Chen told him he could step down. Then Thomas called Emma to the stand. She was nervous, I could tell, but she answered every question clearly and honestly. She explained her schedule, her childcare arrangements, how she balanced everything. She talked about Lucas's routine, his friends, his favorite foods, his fears and dreams. Miss Morrison, Thomas asked, can you tell the court what you do on your days off? I spend them with Lucas, Emma said simply. We go to the park or the library. Sometimes we bake together. He likes to help me make chocolate chip cookies. On Saturdays, we usually go to the farmer's market and then hit up the used bookstore on Barrington Street. Lucas loves graphic novels. And how do you handle the emotional demands of your job? Mr. Pemberton suggested that you bring psychological burdens home to your son. Emma straightened in her chair. I don't discuss the details of my calls with Lucas. He knows I help people, but I don't tell him about the traumatic cases. I have a decompression routine after difficult shifts. I call my supervisor or talk to my partner if something is bothering me. I see a therapist twice a month to make sure I'm processing things healthily. My job has taught me how to separate work from home, how to leave the hard stuff at the station, and be present for my son. One last question, Thomas said. Why do you think you're the best parent for Lucas to live with? Emma looked directly at the judge. Because I know him. I know every part of him. I know when he's really sick versus when he's just trying to get out of going to school. I know that he hates mushrooms but loves broccoli, which is weird for a kid his age. I know that he's worried about climate change because they learned about it in science class. I know he wants to be a paramedic or a firefighter when he grows up because he wants to help people. I know all of this because I'm there, every single day, paying attention. Not because I have the biggest house or the most money, but because I love him more than anything in this world and I show up for him. Every single day, I show up. I'll be honest, I had tears in my eyes. The judge called a recess and said she'd like to speak with Lucas. Mrs. Patterson brought him to the courthouse, and Lucas was taken into the judge's chambers. He was in there for about 20 minutes. When they came out, Judge Chen returned to the bench and looked at all of us. I've reviewed the evidence, heard testimony from both parents, and spoken with Lucas, she said. This is not a case where either parent is unfit. Mr. Morrison clearly loves his son. However, love alone doesn't determine custody. What determines custody is the best interest of the child. She looked down at her notes. Lucas is 10 years old. He's thriving academically despite some challenges with reading. He's socially well-adjusted. He has strong friendships and activities he enjoys. He has a close relationship with both parents. But it's clear that his primary attachment is to his mother. He's lived with her consistently since the separation. His routine is established and working. Judge Chen looked at Derek. Mr. Morrison, I appreciate that you want to provide more for your son. But what he needs isn't a bigger house or more expensive activities. What he needs is consistency. And that's what he has with his mother. The fact that Miss Morrison works irregular hours does not make her an inadequate parent. She has proven she can manage her schedule while meeting all of Lucas's needs. Then she looked at Emma. Miss Morrison, I'm impressed by your dedication both to your profession and to your son. The court recognizes the sacrifices you make daily to ensure Lucas has a stable, loving home. Finally, she delivered her ruling. Primary physical custody remains with the mother, Emma Morrison. The existing visitation schedule will continue, with Mr. Morrison having Lucas every other weekend and alternating holidays. This court finds no compelling reason to disrupt Lucas's current living situation. Motion denied. I watched Derek's face fall. Monica looked angry, whispering something sharp to Pemberton. But Emma just sat there, tears streaming down her face, and Thomas reached over to squeeze her shoulder. Outside the courthouse, Lucas ran to his mother and she swept him up in a hug, even though he was getting too big for that really. He didn't seem to mind. Did you win, Mom? He asked. We won, buddy. You're staying with me. Good, he said matter-of-factly. Monica's house is nice, but it doesn't feel like home, and she doesn't make pancakes as good as you do. Emma laughed and cried at the same time. That night, we all had dinner at my house. I made my famous chili, the one Lucas always asked for. Emma was exhausted but relieved, and Lucas was his usual chatty self, talking about school and hockey and some video game his friend had. After dinner, while Emma was cleaning up and Lucas was watching TV, I went out to the back deck. The November air was cold, but I needed a moment to think. Emma came out a few minutes later, wrapping her coat around herself. You okay, Dad? She asked. I nodded, just thinking about how proud I am of you. She leaned against the railing next to me. I couldn't have done this without you. The lawyer fees alone. Emma, stop. You're family. That's what family does. We stood there in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the lights of Dartmouth twinkle in the distance. You know what the worst part was? Emma said quietly. For a little while, I actually questioned myself. When Monica said those things about my job, about my schedule, part of me wondered if she was right. If Lucas would be better off with more stability, more money, a parent who was always home at 5:30. But you're not that parent, I said. And Lucas doesn't need you to be. He needs you to be exactly who you are. Emma nodded slowly. The judge said something to me after the ruling. She said that in 30 years of family law, she's learned that the best parents aren't the ones with the most resources. They're the ones who show up, consistently, with love and attention. She said Lucas was lucky to have me. He is lucky. But you're lucky too. You've got a great kid there. I know. Emma smiled. He told the judge that he wants to be a paramedic when he grows up. Because of me. I put my arm around her shoulders. That doesn't surprise me one bit. We went back inside where Lucas had convinced Emma to play video games with him before bed. I watched them together on the couch, laughing at the game, and I thought about how easily this could have gone differently if Derek's lawyer had been more competent, if the judge had been more swayed by money and appearances, if Lucas hadn't been so sure about where he wanted to be. But it hadn't gone differently. It had gone right, because at the end of the day, the truth won out. Emma was a wonderful mother, regardless of her profession, or her schedule, or her bank account. And Lucas knew it, even if Derek and Monica didn't. Later, after Lucas was in bed and Emma was getting ready to leave, I walked her to her car. Dad, she said, I want Lucas to know the whole story someday. When he's older, I want him to understand what happened, and why. What are you going to tell him? She thought for a moment. I'm going to tell him that some people measure worth in dollars and job titles and square footage. But the only measure that matters is how you treat people, how you show up for the ones you love, and whether you do your best every single day to make the world a little bit better than you found it. I smiled. That's good. Real good. It's what you always taught Derek, she said. Back when we were first married, you used to tell him that a man's worth isn't in his wallet, it's in his character. I don't think he ever really understood that. But I did. You did. And you're teaching Lucas the same thing. Emma hugged me tight. Thank you, Dad, for everything. Anytime, kiddo. Anytime. I watched her drive away, and then I went back inside, to my quiet house. On my refrigerator, held up by a magnet, was a drawing Lucas had made for me last week. It showed 3 stick figures labeled Mom, me, and Grandpa Frank, all holding hands and smiling. Underneath, in his careful printing, he'd written, my family. That's what it was all about, really. Not the fancy houses, or the fat bank accounts, or the prestigious job titles. Just family. Just showing up, every single day, with love. And nobody, not Derek or Monica or any expensive lawyer, could ever take that away from us. The next few months settled into a comfortable routine. Emma kept working her shifts, Lucas kept playing hockey, and I kept being Grandpa. Derek followed the visitation schedule, though from what Lucas told me, Monica seemed less interested now that the custody battle was over. Apparently, being a stepmother wasn't as appealing when it involved actual parenting and not just playing house in her designer kitchen. About 6 months after the court case, I was at one of Lucas's hockey games. Emma was there, of course, cheering loudly from the stands in her team jacket. Derek was there too, sitting on the opposite side of the rink with Monica. They left before the game ended, something about dinner reservations. After Lucas's team won, Emma and I took him out for pizza to celebrate. He was talking excitedly about the goal he'd scored, and Emma was laughing and ruffling his hair, and I realized that this, right here, was exactly where he was supposed to be. Sometimes the system works. Sometimes judges see through the fancy packaging and recognize what really matters. Sometimes kids get to stay with the parent who loves them most, not the parent who can buy them the most. And sometimes, being a paramedic who works 12-hour shifts and drives a 10-year-old car is exactly enough, because love and presence don't have a price tag. As we sat in that pizza place, with Lucas wearing his hockey jersey and Emma still in her work clothes because she'd come straight from shift, I thought about what I'd tell other grandparents in my situation, other fathers-in-law who watch their kids' ex-spouses try to use money and status to win custody battles. I'd tell them this: don't let anyone make you question your child's worth as a parent. Don't let fancy lawyers or big houses or bank accounts intimidate you. Fight for what's right. Show up. Support your family. Because at the end of the day, when that judge looks at the case, they're not just looking at financial statements and work schedules. They're looking for love. They're looking for commitment. They're looking for the parent who knows their child's hopes and fears and favorite foods and biggest worries. They're looking for the parent who shows up. And thank God, in our case, the right parent won.